Hey guys, Jameson here with just a small update for you. I'm going to be taking a hiatus from doing interviews for the month of April. I have my qualifying exams at the end of the month, which are a notoriously stressful and demanding part of the PhD process. Essentially, like an academic hazing ritual to just prove that I have what it takes before I actually start writing my dissertation. But I'm going to be using this hiatus as sort of an opportunity to take a step back and take inventory on how maybe I can make interviews a little bit better. And this has been on my mind actually for like the last year or so. And not saying that interviews are bad or anything like that. The one we just did with Olaf Mjolva is the most popular one that I've done, and actually quite a few guests. I was really happy to finally have such an icon on the channel and have a great conversation with him. But over the last year or so, I've sort of been thinking to myself, like, there are these changes I want to make. I have this image of like what interviews could look like on the channel, but just really haven't had the time to actually sit back and plan out and execute those changes that I want. So this hiatus is actually going to be that opportunity for me to make those changes and to sort of make these interviews that define the Nordic Sound into what I really want them to be. Now, the purpose of this video here is the fact that this is not something that I'm going to be doing like in a bubble. Essentially, I want your guys' feedback on how you think these interviews could be better, or changes that you would like to see to make these interviews, more engaging and sort of more rewarding for you guys to put the time into listening to and to following. And so to that end, over on Patreon, and this is not a give me money type thing, because these are also going to be available to free members, I've already started putting up polls to sort of like I don't know, field as sort of like a vibe check, I guess, on what kind of changes that you guys would like to see in interviews going forward. I already have a poll over there right now, which is just a very simple question. Do you want music to be threaded throughout these interviews? And what I mean by that is, like if you listen to NPR when they interview a musician, they will introduce the musician with some of their music. So let's say that you're not familiar with Olav Mjolva, but you're about to listen to an hour-long conversation with him. Let's say it would actually be probably a good idea to have music at the very beginning so everyone can sort of start on the same page, at least. But then also threaded throughout the conversation and the interview, music will be interspersed to sort of break it up into sections and to really create the atmosphere around this individual's music. And so I already have a poll up, sort of like, is this something you would like to see on the Nordic Sound? Would this be worth adding yet another step to the very multi-step process of scheduling, promoting, and editing these videos? And so far it's a unanimous yes. And so now I know that when I do return to these interviews, it is going to be absolutely worth my time to take the extra hour or so in the post-production process to thread music from the interviewee throughout the interview to create just a more rewarding and engaging experience for you guys. So that's just one example of the type of thing that I'm thinking of how to implement, or to think of, is it even, worth the effort to do it? And if I were to ask myself, I would think like, it doesn't make that much of a difference. But when I ask the listeners, the patrons, the most dedicated listeners, they're like, please, hell yes, give us the music that is actually, creates a musical atmosphere with the interviews. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm going to have over on the Patreon to sort of field feedback and ideas on how to make the Nordic Sound interviews that much more rewarding and engaging. But then just off the top of my head, some changes that, some actually pretty significant structural changes to interviews going forward here, is right now there's a lot of time between guests, and that puts a lot of weight onto making sure that when I do get around to an interview, I want to sort of like get through as much as possible. But that has ended up being a little formulaic, where I want to make sure I get through their history and, where they come from and what they do now. And when this podcast started, the conversations were a lot more freeform. And that was because I was doing them every week. And so one of the big changes is more frequent conversations and interviews. Based around not new music, and this is the other important thing, where right now interviews are very much based promotionally, right? If someone has new music coming out, that's when I'm going to have them on the channel. Back in the day, it was just, I want to talk to this person. And then that's when they come onto the channel. We have a great talk about literally anything that is on our minds. And that's really what I want to get back to. Of course, new music will be a part of it. You know, this is a way that a lot of you guys experience new music. But I want the priority to be just having a good conversation with the musician that, you know, really brings out the individuality of what makes that musician special. And then also the third change is with these more topical conversations and less promotional conversations, expect actually repeated guests more often, because what's more important to me is the conversation to be had, not who's having it. So I can already think of some musicians off the top of my head that I'm going to have back on that we had on pretty recently, where I feel like the conversation just started to get good when we ran out of time. And so I know there are some follow-up conversations that I want to have there as well with some repeat guests. So all of these are just like some preliminary ideas that I have for changes going forward. That can really just be boiled down to TLDR. Come May, interviews are going to look pretty different. They're still going to be in the spirit of the Nordic Sound, of course, but I really just want to loosen things up. I want to shake things up to actually be more in the spirit of like those first interviews that really made them special here on the Nordic Sound. And I know that many of you agree as well. So this is the stuff that's kind of been on my mind lately with these interviews. They are my favorite part of doing the Nordic Sound. For many of you, they are the only reason you subscribe to the Nordic Sound. And so I really just want to do my best to make these as good as they can be. And so with that said, I would love it if you guys could go head on over to Patreon and actually participate in those polls that are, again, open to free members as well. So we can start really trying to nail down what interviews are going to look like going forward once I get back into it in May. So, quite a long time to ramble on, and I know I'm also breaking a rule here, never post content on April 1st, but I think it's pretty obvious this isn't an April Fool's joke, because this would not be a great April Fool, like what's the punchline? But if you think it's April Fool's joke, I guess April Fool's. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Looking forward to getting back into interviews, and I really would love to hear your guys' feedback on what you want to see with interviews going forward. So, thank you for watching if you made it this far. Of course, Patreon is linked below. Otherwise, take care. See you on the other side.